Hello everyone, my name is Roya and I read a ton of books during August. I already talked about 4 of them in part 1 of my wrap-up, and in the second half, however, of August I ended up reading 8 books. So I'm just going to talk to you guys about them, and I'm going to try to make this video as short as possible because that's a lot of books. First, I read the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which consists of Ship of Magic, Mad Ship, and Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. This series is about ships that are alive, and once 3 people from the family that the ship belongs to die on board, the ship becomes completely sentient. And basically, this follows a girl named Althea, whose family's live ship just became sentient after her father died on board, and she has always thought that she would be the one inheriting the ship from her father, and she loves the ship and she's grown up on board the ship, but actually who ends up sailing the ship is her sister's husband, who is a douchebag. He treats the ship like a thing, basically. He doesn't even want her on board, so she doesn't even get to go with the ship or anything. He just drags his son along instead because someone who's blood related to that family has to be on board, even though his son does not want to do it. And the plot pretty much goes from there. This is a very fast-paced, extremely interesting story full of great characters, a lot of badass women. It does a really good job of keeping the reader kind of guessing at what's really going on and keeping stuff from the reader so that you have a bunch of questions that you want to find out as you keep reading. I liked the first one the best, because the villain was a lot better and he's not really in the second two. We kind of have different people being the main villains, but I still only gave this one 4 stars just because of the the society that just seems to have something against women. And I mean, I know that we're not supposed to like the society. I know that the way society works is kind of what moves the plot forward and why, like, any of the stuff in the entire story happens. But I felt like in this book, for the first, like, 1/4 of the book, we were getting a reminder every other page in the form of some quote about, like, oh, we shouldn't let a woman do this, or she shouldn't do that, she's a woman, and all that stuff. And it just kind of got really annoying very, very quickly. But aside from that, like, the other 2 books are better about that, I think. But I still thought that this book was better, the best one in the series overall. Next, I'm going to talk about the 2 audiobooks that I read this month, the first of which was The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. And this is basically, it had everything that I want in a book. Like, it's a diverse, own voices, even high fantasy, about a friendship breakup that's very heavy on the world building and the military aspect. So basically, like, a lot of that, those are all things that I want to see more of in books that I love reading about, and yet somehow I just did not enjoy this book that as much as I wanted to. I think it's because mostly for the entire first half of the book, the storytelling was kind of weird in that it kind of just went so all over the place that by the time we got to see the same character again, I'd basically forgotten, like, who they were. And then also there was a lot of, like, the story kind of just told us some major event that happened instead of showing it to us. So it would say, like, and then the city burned down, or and then there was a raid and these 3 people escaped. And it's kind of like, wait, so we don't get to, like, see that happen through the eyes of somebody who's there or any of that stuff? Like, okay. So for some reason, like, some of that just made me not be able to get fully into the story, but I really did like it, and I definitely do recommend it. I just didn't think that it was as good as I, like, wanted it to be. The next audiobook that I read was Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews, and I formerly didn't really have that much interest in reading this, but then last year, if you remember how much I loved The Haters, which is by the same author, so I thought, hey, well, I should totally read his other book. But I did not like this book pretty much at all. So basically there are some things that I liked about it, like the fact that almost everyone is Jewish, that there's no love interest, that the main character is overweight and very, like, not very good looking, all that stuff. Like, that's all great, but I just didn't understand why we were following this dude who's, like, a dick to his friends and who doesn't give a shit about this girl that he's friends with, and that's the entire plot of the book. Like, I just didn't understand why we needed this story. I just didn't think that I needed this story in my life particularly, and that's kind of it. Like, I mean, it wasn't terrible or anything. There were definitely some good things about it, but I just didn't care. The next book that I read is The Neverending Story by Michael Ende, and I remember the movie being a lot more exciting than this book was. I mean, I haven't seen it in forever, but whatever. So basically, I felt like the first half of the book was very, very boring and just kind of felt like it was the first chapter the entire time. But then the second half really picked up a lot more, so I am very glad that I read this, but I wish that the first half had been a little bit less boring. Vengeance Road by Erin Bowman. This is about a girl named Kate who is trying to hunt down the men who killed her father. And this was definitely the Wild West young adult book that I've been wanting ever since Bullet Catcher turned out to be a complete failure. Because yeah, if you didn't remember, I did not like that book, but this was so good. It had, you know, it had Apaches, it had Mexicans, it had shooting, it had horseback riding, it had so much action. The chick is so badass, and I really liked this book. It wasn't like, I wasn't like blown away by how good it was, but I really, really liked it and would definitely recommend it. And finally, The Egypt Game by Zilpha Keatley Snyder. This is actually a book that I read back when I was 10, but the only thing that I even remembered about it at all was that there was a kid in this book who has a stuffed animal octopus named Security, and it gets lost, and I remember how they found it, but that was all I remembered about this book. So this is a middle grade book about basically these two girls named Melanie and April who wind up starting this game where they pretend that some dude's backyard is Egypt, and they build like cool shrines to different Egyptian gods made out of like stuff that they find, and then they basically like go there and pretend they're they're in Egypt. They get like some other kids involved, so there are like 6 kids total who are like going to Egypt in this dude's backyard and having tons of fun. And meanwhile, there's like some killer on the loose murdering children, and that's basically what this is about. I felt like, I mean, of course, there is sort of the whole nostalgic factor because I read this as a kid with my dad and my sister, and I really did like this for what it is, but it did come across as very dated in terms of, like, not just the time it was set and whatnot, but also the storytelling, because I think this was written in, like, the 60s or 70s or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but we didn't really, like, the point of view changed, like, every paragraph, practically. Like, it would say what one character was thinking and then immediately what the other one was thinking, and I was like, who are we following here? And then also, people didn't really have personalities. They kind of just had quirks. So I kind of thought that was, you know, people could have had a little bit more personality in the story, but it did deal with some very deep topics, but, and, like, I did appreciate, like, kind of, this book was pretty good for what it is, but I wasn't, like, blown away by it or anything. So these are the books, plus the 2 audiobooks, that I read during the second half of August. I should also mention that I DNF'd Zero Repeat Forever, which is a huge bummer. I really wanted to like this book, but somehow it just came across as just too generic and too boring, and I'd gotten like 200 pages into it and still wasn't enjoying it. And then I was starting a full-time job like the next day and kind of thought, well, do I really want to be, like, I'm going to be working 7 days a week now. Do I really want to spend my breaks reading a book that I'm not all that into? So I DNF'd it, and that was a huge bummer. So there you have it, folks. Those are the books that I read. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read this month, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!